Let go of Aragonese. Languages are consistently dying because either the language is only known by the elderly or the language was assimilated by another primary language. Every 14 days, a language dies, and it is estimated that by the end of the century, nearly half of the remaining 7,000 languages will be extinct. Currently, Aragonese has less than 10,000 native speakers and is labeled as a severely endangered language. Aragonese is found in the region of Aragon, which is located in the northeastern part of Spain. There are many reasons why Aragonese is dying, but the main one is that Castilian Spanish is becoming the prominent language in Spain. Castilian Spanish is spreading throughout Spain and is the leading language in the economy. A third-party company is willing to spend $500,000 to save an endangered language, but that money should be used to help out people that are in need or use it to hire experts to record the culture of the Aragonese people, instead of trying to save the endangered language. Although that $500,000 will help in the fight to preserve Aragonese, such as implementing the language into schools or trying to incorporate the language into everyday lives, we have to understand that letting Aragonese die will let Castilian flourish and unify Spain by making Castilian the only language alive. During the Middle Ages, Aragon was one of the kingdoms in the Iberian Peninsula. As the kingdom became to be one of the stronger kingdoms during the time, Aragonese began to spread. The kingdom of Aragon started to gain its power in 1035 when Sancho III left Ramiro I control over a small Pyrenean country. Ramiro slowly added other counties from the east, and by 1104 the kingdom had doubled in size. By 1137 the ruler of the Catalonian kingdom married the heiress of Aragon. In wake of the death of John II, both the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile united to form a majority of what is modern Spain. Unfortunately, in 1833 the Old Kingdom was divided into three existing provinces today that are called Huesca, Zaragoza, and Teruel. At one point, Aragonese was becoming the prominent language being spoken in Spain, due to the expansion of the Kingdom of Aragon. Sadly, the Castilian kingdom pushed back and reduced the influence of the Aragon kingdom. The Castilian kingdom showed a force of strength and forced other kingdoms to assimilate to Castilian culture. That is a prime example of survival of the fittest. In the article, Let Them Die, Keenan Malik talks about why we should let endangered languages die due to them being ineffective ways of communicating. What Malik says is similar to the idea of Darwinism, that everything belongs to an ecosystem and that languages are no exceptions. It is perceived that languages also follow the same rules of Darwinism. Darwinism is defined in the Oxford English Dictionary as any of various theories, doctrines, or philosophical systems which incorporate elements of Darwin's theory, such as competition, adaptation, or gradual or progressive evolution, or apply them analogously in other spheres. More generally, a process of gradual evolution or progressive development, intense or ruthless competition for survival or success. The Castilian kingdom had better resources to ensure the survival of their language. The death of Aragonese is natural and is an inevitable consequence of social change. Languages will evolve over time no matter what because everything follows the natural order of the world. The language should die because it is just making it harder for people to communicate with other people in other regions of Spain. If Castilian Spanish were to become the only language in Spain, then it would become much easier for people to interact with each other across borders. There would be no longer a need for translators to translate from Aragonese to Castilian Spanish or vice versa. Chris Broholm is a well-known writer that writes articles for actual fluency. Chris Broholm wrote an article about how endangered languages should be left alone to die when their time is near. He uses many examples to explain his position on why they should die. Chris Broholm compares languages to businesses, that successful languages should thrive and create a great surplus. What he means is that there should be more speakers of the language being born than dying. Broholm tries to create a sense of pathos by emphasizing this idea with his comparison to the real world. A language should be able to flourish like a successful business would in the real world. Languages are meant to be a way for species to communicate with one another. Broholm writes that a language is a means of communication, and if a language dies, then it obviously did not serve as a useful tool of communication. There are languages that are thriving better than others. For example, English is becoming one of the main tools of communication throughout the world. Mostly anywhere you travel to, you can survive by speaking English. Aragonese appeared to be the main way of communicating during the Middle Ages, but it seemed it was an ineffective way of communication. The language was being spread throughout the kingdom when the kingdom of Aragon was taking over other counties. Now only less than 10,000 people use this language to communicate. Malik talks about the debate between linguists that want to preserve endangered languages. These linguists call themselves liberal defenders of minority rights. Malik writes that the whole point of a language is to enable communication. As the renowned Mexican historian and translator Miguel León Portilla has put it, in order to survive, a language must have a function. A language spoken by one person or even a few hundred is not a language at all. Malik also claims that the whole point of a language is to be a bridge to communicate with others. Then he quotes a Mexican historian saying a language spoken by a few is not a language because it will no longer serve a purpose in the world. Aragonese became an endangered language because the language became prehistoric. After the kingdom of Aragon stopped spreading through Spain, the kingdom of Castilian was continuing spreading throughout Spain. With the expansion of the kingdom of Castilian, the Aragonese influence diminished during this time. Castilian became one of the main languages during the Middle Ages, so by Miguel León Portilla's standards, it served as an effective tool. There are many advocates that believe that every language should be saved because it holds a huge part of their identity. Although this is true, we don't necessarily need to save Aragonese. It is just making it difficult for other people who are being forced to learn the language. People can be learning Castilian Spanish, which is the primary language in Spain. People will not change their identity. They will still be the same person they were. Learning Castilian is a form of evolving your identity. People are growing by opening up this new side of themselves that is able to communicate with other people in Spain. Another way of thinking about it is what Broholm argues, that if I started to learn one of these extinct or near-extinct languages, then I would be simply serving as the respirator who keeps patients with no hope of recovery alive just long enough for their relatives to say goodbye to them, which is a great metaphor for language extinction as well. Broholm compares the learning of a new language to a respirator. His comparison shows that people are only prolonging the inevitable. There is a reason why the language is dying. It is highly unlikely that the language will survive. But the more people advocate that it is vital to save every possible language, the harder it is for society to move on and unify to one language. In the aspect of culture, many preserver linguistics believe that languages should be kept alive at any cost because they hold a ton of knowledge of the community's culture. Culture is something that people should study and hold records of. Linguists must prevent the culture from perishing, but it will not be in the way of preserving the language. Aragonese holds a lot of culture in its language, but people can translate everything and record it to ensure the survival of the culture. There are many ways to ensure the preservation of a culture. Malik states, in bemoaning cultural homogenization, campaigners for linguistic diversity fail to understand what makes a culture dynamic and responsive. It is not the fracturing of the world with as many different tongues as possible. It is rather the overcoming of barriers to social interaction. The more universally we can communicate, the more dynamic our cultures will be, because the more they will be open to new ways of thinking and doing. Malik is trying to say that if everyone is able to speak the same language, then we will be able to communicate with each other, and the deeper our culture would be. Our culture would evolve, merging different cultures together without a language barrier. There are too many tongues in the world that have these language barriers. Malik is suggesting a monolingual language system, where the world will speak only one language. Having a monolingual language will make it easier for everyone to learn and communicate with people around the world. Preserver linguists are wrong on saving every language because culture is all about the way we communicate with one another. Having one language would make people be open to change in their culture because they would understand other people's background. Another argument is that saving a dying language is important because of all the specific phrases and folklore that it holds. Linguists will argue that there are certain phrases that only a few languages can explain. A language can hold special meanings to different objects, but it does not mean that the rest of the world would not understand. Folklore is also passed down through languages, but can still be recorded without having the language. There are resources out there that can translate and record what these special phrases are. A great example of folklore being alive is the stories of ancient Egypt. The folklore was stored in hieroglyphs, and all that was needed to translate was to understand the language. The language preservation of Latin and ancient Egyptian is a great example of not needing the language to be alive to understand the old stories and phrases. This hieroglyph phrase was commonly found on tombstones. It held a special meaning only used for the dead. It means living eternally. Carpe noctem is a well-known Latin phrase that means to seize the night. These phrases can be heard in today's time. Both of those languages have been dead for a long period of time, but yet we still have a ton of knowledge on their way of living and their culture. There are voice recordings of the language or even written pieces of works that explain their culture. One effective tool that we have now is the use of technology. We are able to record and even share information over the internet quickly so everyone can access this information. A culture will never truly die if people will document everything that a language holds. Aragonese has its own traditions that most will say that if the language dies, then those traditions are dead as well. One of the traditions that they embrace is their tradition of hosting a traditional music festival. The festival holds presentations of plays and dances called jodas. Joda is known to be one of their oldest forms of dancing that dates back to the 18th century. There are many festivals across Spain. The Joda festival was hosted in Huesca. If Aragonese were to die, then people would say that this form of art will disappear. However, that is not true because Joda is such a big thing in Spain that Aragonese tradition will not disappear. The Joda Music Festival is one of the biggest in Spain, so no matter what happens to the language, that tradition will always be there. Many would argue that once the language dies, then all of its tradition will go with it. Joda is so popular that this tradition would not go away. All efforts on trying to preserve Aragonese should be stopped because it is only making it harder for the rest of Spain to communicate effectively with each other. Finding translators to translate from Aragonese to Castilian is tedious and it takes up resources. This problem would not be an issue if everyone knew Castilian. Castilian should be the prominent language in Spain. It should be the only language that is used to communicate in the country. This will help everyone socialize more and work to make the country a better place. Castilian Spanish would be one of the major languages in the world. Once Castilian joins together with Aragonese, both cultures would become one keeping some of the Aragonese traditions alive. Castilian would be the language that everyone speaks in Spain. People that speak Aragonese would be at a disadvantage because Spain's prominent language is Castilian. The economy runs on this language. Employers are looking for people that can speak Castilian, in which they can profit from. Once the Aragonese people assimilate to the Castilian culture, then they will be equal to everyone else. Linguists will argue that this strips the identity of the Aragonese people. Although they are losing their native language, they are adding a new part into their identity. They will still have the Aragonese part of them. People would just add the Castilian to the side. No one will urge the death of the Aragonese language. Slowly the language would die on itself. The culture would be preserved. By that time, only the language would be dead. The more we let endangered languages die, the more the world might move in a direction of being a monolingual world. A monolingual world will be the future and will relive all cultural tensions. Communication with other countries and societies would be so much easier if everyone would be able to speak the same language. It will prevent any cultural wars and establish a sense of peace when communicating. Instead of investing the $500,000 on Aragonese and trying to save the language, the money that the company is giving should be used to help those who speak Aragonese transition into speaking Castilian, and whatever is left should be used to preserve the culture.